Welcome to the new episode of All That Jazz. I'm your host Matias, and I have with me Marte Relling Uri. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And you are a soul healer and a self-love queen, among other things, which I find that's a fascinating description. So let's go with the latter, the self-love queen. So I think you would agree that self-love is really important in life.
Yeah, change starts from within. We cannot change others, but we can transform our inner life. And we tend to treat others exactly how we treat ourselves. So the more we dive into the self-love and acceptance, the more this will actually reflect out in the world. So I believe we change the world from within, as in me and you having the focus of that inside.
So if I ignore others and I'm aloof a little bit, that means I'm ignoring my own needs as well, because actually that's what happens in my life. Oh yeah, okay. Well, the silence tells me everything. Okay, let's move on. um, so how did you get into this kind of work? Oh, it's a long story. Okay, let's go back to the beginning.
No, the thing is, I look to the body. So when you ask me a question, I'm going to do this a lot. I'm going to look out in the air and just take a breath, and then I connect to my body and I speak from there. So I try not to answer from my mind. I try to answer from my body. And sometimes these questions then require me to go a little bit deeper within. So I kind of just shut off a little bit the world and go inside and then find my center.
Oh, so before when I
um,
said that you were silent, it's not you were just like uh waiting for information.
yeah, and a lot of the time, really, how we can support the best is also just by deeply listening, and also letting the other person have their own process and finding their own answers instead of rushing to give an answer.
Mm, yeah, I had I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson, but I've sometimes seen him in contentious interviews, and he would sometimes he would pause a lot longer than normally what people would deem necessary, because he was thinking, and but he was, granted, he was using his mind, but still he was sometimes he was pausing for quite a bit to really think about what the person was saying, so to come back with a response.
Mm. I
So
think it's something, I think it's 8 seconds or now 6 seconds actually,
hmm,
is a very short amount of time that for most people will feel is uncomfortable with the silence. And so starting to be comfortable with the silence is perhaps one of the biggest things we can do for the world. It's again not rushing in to fill the void, but letting things develop naturally.
this reminds me, there was a he's a Scottish comedian, went to US. His name was Craig Ferguson, and what I loved is sometimes I don't know if you want to try this. Sometimes at the end, for fun, he would say, "You want to play the harmonica, or do you want the uncomfortable silence?" And sometimes the guest would be like, "The uncomfortable silence." So the uncomfortable silence would just be them not saying anything and looking at each other. Um, yeah, you want to try that, and then the person that loses would be the one that says, "This is yeah, I don't want to do this anymore." All
Okay, let's go.
right. All right. Sorry. I think laughing that you lose. All right. That was maybe 35 seconds. I don't know, but it felt like a long time.
I think it was longer.
Yeah. Okay.
I have practice in this, so.
You have practice. You haven't any. Oh, I have not. But actually, that's not true. There's a course. I don't think I'm allowed to say the name because like, but actually there was a course that I went to that they made us. Those who done it will recognize this. They made us like go to a person and look and greet them. Maybe sometimes shake their hands, but just look in their eyes, not say a word, and that would be it. And then like we just go around the room and say that for not say, but like greet a couple people like that. And yeah, but it's a fascinating thing because we need in ordinary life, it sounds like we need to fill the void with words. You're doing it again. Okay. Yes, you have to say yes, of course.
Well, this is why I recommend meditation.
Mm,
It's like the Vipassana way, learning to meditate with only focus on the breath. It transforms a lot because through that we'll start to learn to observe what's happening inside and more being comfortable with discomfort.
mm. Yeah, don't worry about the camera. I'll be back. So is the discomfort and is it like a social expectation that we have on the world that we want to the world to make us not feel bad and look at ourselves?
Could you rephrase that?
So, oh yeah, that's good. So if is a lot of the societal expectations basically us wanting others to fulfill the expectations we have for them, and so we don't want to be, it's kind of like we're holding people to a certain expectation, to a certain standard, and if they don't fulfill that, we might be uncomfortable, but we might blame them, be like, well, it's their fault because they're not doing what the societal norm is.
Yeah, and for me that comes back actually to self-love or lack of it. So if we're not filling our own cup, then we're dependent on other people filling that cup. And then we are basically in a lot of ways like beggars. And we all do this because it's what we conditioned into in society. So we then expect others to be there for us and do things for us, and we're not giving it to ourselves.
Mm.
And then when they're not fulfilling what we think we need, then it comes resentment and anger. But this is actually from ourselves because we know that we are failing ourselves, or for instance, we are maybe putting all of our energy to other people and we're depleting ourselves. And that builds again resentment.
Mm. Do you think there is any justified anger that we have towards other people?
I think anger is a really beautiful emotion and feeling to work with. It's one of my favorite energies to work with. It's in anger has like anger in itself, because it's important to have, there's the pure energetic activation, which I call emotion of anger. And that is purely, again, activation of the energy inside. It's sensations in the body. And then there's difference from actions or reactions and thoughts. So when I say anger is beautiful, I do mean the pure physical activation of energy, because it's a massive amount of energy that is released and really given to us in order to create a big change. So if we do feel anger, it's because we are coming across a pattern or a situation that needs a lot of energy in order to transmute.
Mm. You know, a lot of times I'm annoyed with myself. Like there's this, I was thinking about it today, and I think like a lot of times I have the inner child running the show. Like, for example, like when I go to sleep, I always used to really severely dislike when my mother used to tell me go to sleep. And this is embarrassing, but I'll share this. There was you know, MSN Messenger back in the day. I don't know if you used it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I had my mother on for a while, and she was in the kitchen, I was in my room, and sometimes she would message me to go to sleep, you know. And then after a while I blocked my mother. But you know, it's a pattern. Like staying up late is a pattern that still is to this day. I went to bed like at 4 or 5 in the morning today. So it's really something. So I guess what my question would be, like, what would be the way to transmute the emotions to facilitate change in one's life?
First of all, is starting to explore the feeling without the story, trying to tap into the pureness of the energy and letting go of the story.
Mm.
So for instance, one of the things I have a certification is somatic experiencing. We call it self-pleasure, and not to be confused with masturbation. So it's self-pleasure is taking the time. You can think of it as feminine meditation, really. So it's taking the time and be with one's emotions. So for instance, if one is feeling, so what you said there, I would say is two different things. One is if you want to explore anger, but if one is feeling anger, then one can, for instance, put on quite angry music and have pillows and express that anger, like let it physically express itself.
Right.
And trying to then just be what is coming there. And instead of going into mind loops and mind like thinking and trying to think our way out of it, it's to let it express itself. And my experience then is that then we start to get to the core of what's really underneath. Because usually, like most of the, well, I would say anything and everything that has us feel anger in life now has the origin usually from childhood. So it's usually then some kind of feeling of being insignificant. Anger can also, of course, be a rightful anger. For instance, if someone is trying to attack you, you know, that is also then a rightful anger. And the situation you were saying about not going late to bed, for instance,
Yeah.
that is again something to explore, for instance, in saying that, okay, for 20 minutes now, I'm gonna set a time and I'm gonna let myself be in the emotions and the stories that's coming up. So I'm gonna set a timer, I'm gonna lay down on the floor, for instance, and then see what is coming up as why do I have this resistance?
Okay, so it's like letting go of the negative emotion and kind of being with because I guess you're saying it's an emotional charge that that's why I'm doing this. So it's like I'm being run by the emotion. So if I let the emotion out, then I will change my behavior.
Well, if I was going to do this in a session with you, I would bring you back to your inner child that is acting out because it doesn't want to do what its mother is telling it.
Yeah, right.
And then through there, allowing, for instance, that inner child to be angry with the mother, saying to the mother exactly what it wants to say. And this is also something one can do as exercise for oneself. Because as children, to criticize our parents will feel like death, because we're so dependent on our parents to survive, because our system is basically the same as in when we're, Stone Age time. So we have this caveman instinct as children in order to, our caregivers have to love us, otherwise we'll be cast out and we will die. And so instead of then saying to our parents, if we feel that will be met with, for instance, anger or resentment, or that we will be rejected, we will instead internalize that kind of frustration and act it out in other ways.
Right. Would you agree with that? There's a guy called Jesse Lee Peterson. He has a radio show, and he often says that people should forgive their mother and get closer to their father. Is that often the case, that people have resentment against their mother? I think maybe probably a lot of people have resentment against their father as well. Forgive both of their parents.
Yeah, I think basically all of us are walking around with a lot of mom and dad issues. It's allowing that to have its safe space, for instance, with a coach or by ourselves, and letting that play out is a really huge way to let it go. And also being a parent yourself, it will also, through being a parent and in interaction with a child, if you start to let go of your own mother and father issues, then my experience is you become a more tolerant parent yourself. Because what tends to happen is that we often become the same or the opposite way as our parents.
Yeah.
When we ourselves become a parent, or the way we behave towards people that we feel are acting like a child. So for instance, if another adult is being emotional and basically being, pulled back to their childhood, then the way we will behave towards them, the way that our caregivers acted towards us when we were emotional as children, until we start to be with ourselves. That's again the self-love. So when we start to be with ourselves and accept that we are emotional beings, and start to allow ourselves to have the inner reactions as emotions, having the tantrums, having the anger, having all this, having space inside, then that will less and less have the need to act out in the world.
Right.
So I don't believe in negative emotions. I believe all emotions are valuable. It's a matter of, they will have a shadow aspect, which is what we can call the negative aspect.
Yeah.
Or it can have a light aspect, which is something that's a gift. So for instance, anger has a shadow aspect, and anger has a gift aspect.
Right. I'm here. So, but it's interesting, because a lot of people would say that that anger is something to avoid, but in a way you're saying the same thing, but in different words. You're saying that to welcome it, to use anger, and to but you're saying indirectly, you're saying that this is on a scale, you want to get rid of this so we can get to something higher. No,
I don't believe in getting rid of it. No, I think the reason why there is so much shadows and darkness as an evil in the world is because people are trying to get rid of what they call negative emotions. And what happens then is that when anger rises, when all these, these emotions rise, that we have put a label on that I do not want this.
Yeah.
Then suppression. So when it starts to bubble up, it's suppressed. And that's the shadow. That is how shadow and darkness are building up in the world and inside of us. And this is energy that then becomes energetic blocks. So it usually then tends to play out in, I either a physical illness in the body because of that block, or as an emotional violence towards others, as in projecting that energy out onto others.
Yeah.
So for instance, if we do not ever want to accept that we have angry emotions inside of us, we will actually start to see other people's reaction very quickly as angry, and then be like, you're angry, like, you know, and like disallowing people to have a natural emotional response.
Right.
And so for instance, then if someone isn't angry, or they're just feeling something isn't okay, and they're trying to tell that, and then someone will tell you, you're angry, you're not allowed.
Right.
Then that will fuel more anger. You see, you're trying to see it's a very complex thing, but it's about, if we own that anger is a natural response, then we start to get to choose what actions we can take from that energy. So the more I accept anger within me, the earlier and earlier I will notice that is building up inside. And the earlier I notice something, you know, the more I can control how I use that energy. But if we suppress it, what happens is, you know, the famous graph that spills over, and then someone who is, you know, maybe it's a cashier in the store, or maybe it's someone you love, you know, that gets the whole glass that is just spilling over.
Right. Wow, that's
So,
quite specific.
yeah.
Cashier in the store. Wow. But it's okay. So there's two ways to this. There's either you suppress it or repress it, I guess, or there's the way you're talking about, which is going into it and using it. But still, would you say, okay, because you're not saying it's good or bad, but would you say, let's say acceptance and neutrality is preferable over anger, of course.
Could you rephrase that?
But would you still say that anger, I mean, acceptance and like being neutral is preferable over being angry?
I don't believe in having preference, no. I think having preference is basically the same as avoiding something. So if we're going to use the word acceptance, I would say acceptance for the fact that we have the whole range of emotions and feelings. And what happens when we start to have this acceptance is that actually, as a beautiful default, we start to have less of the extreme. Because again, the quicker we notice, the more, you know, it will not build up. So it will not be a huge fire until we notice that we're angry. And we just yelled at someone and we didn't even know that we were angry.
Right.
So it's that kind of becoming more and more sensitive. That is really the gift. So again, noticing earlier and earlier that something is bubbling and changing, and then being able to be with that and observe. And that's again why being able to be with discomfort and being able to be with quiet, and then notice inside that, oh, something is brewing, something is changing, and then holding like a gentle space for that to come up. And then, for instance, what more and more quicker will happen is that either to be able to feel that energy and not do anything about it, just letting it burn through the body. And that is very possible to actually be super angry, but staying calm and having that energy just flow through the body. And again, then activating something inside of you, whatever is needed. And the other alternative that usually you can combine with the first one is to be able to express very early that if you speak to me like that, I feel hurt and I do not want to continue this conversation. You know, rather than waiting until someone has truly stepped all over your boundaries.
Oh yeah. I've had that experience many times. Yes.
And the reality is that no one is actually ever, well, I'm going to say rephrase that, because sometimes people are crossing your boundaries. But most of all, usually it's us that let people step over our boundary because we are afraid of creating discomfort by voicing that this isn't comfortable.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. Let me rephrase what I asked earlier. So, because I can't get you to admit some basic. Okay, is it would it be preferable to accept your anger or to be angry at your anger?
Well, that question kind of answers itself, right?
No, not necessarily.
Well, the choice you're saying is that either meet yourself with acceptance, which is actually usually then is the childhood wound, is that we were not accepted and loved for having emotions as children.
Yeah.
And the other alternative is self-mutilation through not, doing the same, telling yourself you're not allowed to have this. And it's self-mutilation.
So there is a little bit of duality in your perception. I just want to make that clear. A little bit. But I think I see your point. You are emphasizing that how we frame it is paramount, so that we're not escaping it, but that we accept and go into it and use it rather than having it build up, like a huge chain that you're dragging with you.
Yeah, and sometimes it can also just be about observing it.
Yeah.
Because usually the anger, for instance, that's bubbling up has nothing to do with that person.
Yeah, right. Or is it possible that people add to your anger just a little bit? Like you have a giant store of anger, but people add onto it, so that you keep accumulating more.
If one is avoiding anger, then yes, I believe that law of attraction will make sure that you continue attracting that. And part of that is because I believe energy wants to be healed. Energy wants to, first of all, be released and felt, but it also wants to be transmuted. So if we are trying to avoid anger, I believe that the universe, and I'm doing this, so will continue to attract you to situations where this will be triggered.
Yeah.
And every time you have the possibility of changing it by doing something different. But if people stay stuck in, I do not want anger, then they're going to continue to attract this. So for instance, when I notice that I am attracting something that I do not like, I know that it's time for me to sit down and be with what is it I am rejecting within myself. What is it I'm not owning?
Right.
And what I always find that is that, because I can't change the world, but I can change how I respond to it. And when I own my part in the attraction, then these situations tends to either stop or be transmuted to be in a higher frequency situations rather than the low frequency.
Right. So there's a change. So you go to would you say the soul then overall is at a higher frequency than it was before?
The soul is pure, so I don't necessarily believe that. Oh, could you rephrase that question?
So would you say that the soul then or because by the soul I mean a person's soul that's obviously connected to your mind and body. It's does that then I was gonna say calibrate, does that vibrate higher than if you let go of, or go through a lot of your the stuff that you need to sit with, a lot of the emotions.
Yeah, so it's the ego patterns that is attracting, that is keeping us away from our soul mission.
Right.
So when we then, and I see emotions as the way that our soul is communicating with us, saying that, sending the energy, activating the energy, and saying that it's something here for you. It's like physically sending, kind of like, okay, there's something here for you to take notice of. Something is happening now, like you're in your ego pattern or something, noticing, or you're letting people step over you, which is our ego pattern. And so when we then start to look at the emotions as gifts, as our soul activating something within us.
Yeah. This is what you need to work on, like here.
Yeah. Pay attention is basically saying, pay attention.
So you would say that in a relationship that's abusive, there is always two people that's required to tango. So there's one and the other, and one kind of attracts the other, and the other goes along with. Yeah, but that would be
both. There's never innocent party.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there is because that a lot of people would say it's a controversial view, to say the least. To that they would call it to blame the victim. It's really unpopular. Like and that would not stand up in a court of law, because if you could prove that this person hit another person, then the court of law would be, well, this person is guilty, or this person did that. But there's other dynamics at play. You're saying that we can't just totally blame one person of the two.
There's these extreme examples that are really difficult and complex. That is, when we're talking about violence and people actually violating, it's a tricky situation to talk about.
Yeah.
Because it's again so complex. And also, well, what I do believe is that we are here with the soul mission. And I believe that soul mission, some people have chosen to experience, for instance, violence in order to be able to heal that and then lead the way for others. Because there is a lot of evil acts in the world. There is a lot of shadow and darkness, exactly because human nature have this avoidance of their own inner demons.
Right.
But we have everything inside.
Right. So there is good and evil in the world, of course. I do believe that.
Yeah. Well, I believe there are evil acts. I do not believe in evil
people.
And no, I don't. I believe that there are some souls that are so shrouded in darkness that their soul isn't able to communicate. But I do not believe that I believe their soul is equally as pure as yours and mine.
Well, that's a technicality, I would say, because God created all of us. You could say all of us are part of the one, but for the moment, I would still, if you pick up a flower that has thorns, you learn not to do that. If you go in the bushes where there's snakes, you learn not to do that. So it's kind of like certain people, like roses with thorns. You cannot go too close, or you're gonna get blood on your hands, in a way. So I would define that in simple terms as evil. Whatever is beneficial for humanity, let's say, is good, and whatever is not is could be evil. That's a very simple definition, but that's how I would view it. But then I do agree with your technical analysis that there is But yeah, I don't know. Actually, I think freedom of choice gives us, people where they want to be, to the soul to experience darkness, let's say.
But I do believe in accumulation, as in, I believe that, we come here with wounds that we have inherited, as in,
Past lives.
yeah, but not necessarily, yeah, past lives, but also in the ancestry, like
Yeah.
from our parents, like they even done quite advanced research on this on mice, and they found that if they put the mom or dad mice through some kind of trauma, and then even if they took the mom or dad away from the children, then up to 14 generations later, the mice baby would respond as if the trauma was done to them.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
So trauma is stored in the body. It will be transferred onto other generations. And this trauma will shroud the energy, as in, it's like a veil to the soul. And this can be denser and denser and denser. So I believe that the people are doing evil things in the world in that way is innocent, because they're born into an ancestry that has very thick, like for generations, has built up this kind of layer to the soul, if that makes sense.
Right.
But inside, like the soul itself is pure, but it's the kind of the human avatar, if you call it, that is just have all this shadow and darkness that is keeping the light out.
I wanna ask you. So go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say that, because if we call people evil, the problem then is that we're not owning that inside of us there is capacity for equal evil. Because if we would have been born into a different family, different situation, and all these kind of extreme situations that can happen in our lives, we all have the capacity.
Yeah, I agree. Like one of my favorite philosophers, Eric Hoffer, he was once on a TV show back in the 60s, and he's like, nothing that man has ever done is foreign to me. All the evil acts, there's crumbs of everyone inside of us. There's Hitler in me, there's Stalin in me, and all that. So it's a very interesting statement. He was he was a great man. Anyway, I was gonna ask you about something interesting, because when we talked before about I don't know what we were talking about, but it came to me a question about, yeah, we were talking about resentment in parents. So there, I guess there is truth to the popular conception of women and daddy issues, that they're seeking out something in men that they have not gotten from their father, and they probably have a resentment against their dad, let's say, or they have no dad in their life.
That's a topic I actually haven't dove that in quite into.
Okay.
I feel like that is someone who works with relationships, for instance, more directly. But I can speak to, let me just feel, yeah, no, I do actually in session, I just didn't put it together like that. But there is always going to be anger and resentment towards one's parents that is hidden underneath everyone.
So we have to forgive our mother and father for what they have done and not done to us.
Well, I actually think it comes down to acceptance, that the first accept. Many try to go straight to forgiveness, and by that is actually bypassing the hurt inner child. So by, again, self-love and self-acceptance, first to accept the fact that I do feel fury towards my mom or my dad. And actually underneath there is even having violent thoughts about wanting to kill or hit.
Right.
And acceptance of that, and through that acceptance, forgive oneself, like is this kind of acceptance that is there, and from acceptance it will kind of blossom into a forgiveness of oneself for having these violent instincts.
Right.
And from there, my experience is that forgiveness of one's parents just comes as a beautiful kind of side effect.
Okay, that's an interesting definition. Would you say that for everybody, if you want to forgive, first you have to accept what was done to you or done to others that you love?
Yeah, but then again, done to you is then also understanding. My experience is the more we understand what's happening inside ourselves with all these emotions, violence and hurt and all these, it's like a pretty intense movie inside of ourselves, like inside of our head.
Right.
And when we start then to be able to observe everything that happening inside, and first of all starting to have a little bit of almost like a distance, that I am not my thoughts, because this is a thinking machine. It's created with the sole purpose of to think. And it will be between 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And it will have the whole range of the animal inside of us that wants to kill or hit or hurt. It has the parts that only wants to eat or only think about sex. And then it also has the part of us that is thinking, wanna hold hands and sing kumbaya. It's
Right.
like we have all these parts inside of us. In addition to the hurt child that just wants to stomp or yell. And, it's like, so this acceptance of everything that is happening inside, and then getting to that kind of understanding that this is again suggestions that's coming up, and I am not what I'm thinking, I am what I choose to do. So through that, we start to observe our own reactivity and everything that's happening inside. And when we then develop a compassion for that, naturally, as a default, we will start to develop compassion for others, because we understand that they are also sometimes caught in their thinking box and reacting from their thinking box. And through that, we start to see also our parents as humans. We start to think of them as gods that are supposed to endure everything and be perfect.
Right.
So as you see, for me, it all starts and really in many ways stops with ourselves.
How do you, you're talking about soul and its mission, how does one know what the mission of one's soul is? Like, how, like oftentimes I think to myself, what am I supposed to do here? I guess maybe this is one small part doing this, but yeah, like I think a lot of people wonder, what is my purpose in the world?
Okay, so it's actually a lot connected to anger. Anger is a great motivator, and anger, when you transmute it, turns into passion. So the question is that what makes you angry, and what lights your fire? And the more and more when we start to see that is connected.
Politics,
because anger again can be that great motivator. I want to change this, I'm going to do something about it. It's
right.
Like that kind of, it gives, for instance, for me, when I tap into feeling anger, I feel like I get like a lot of energy to my feet, and I feel like this readiness to jump and do something. And that is again kind of the motivation, because it can be really scary to put yourself out there in the world and do something, because human beings tends to like to have things be normal and continue in the same way. Humans do not like change. And Well, we can grow to learn change, but as a default, people do not like change. So that kind of anger turns into the passion and the motivation to kick off and daring to do something that is going against the stream.
Yeah, not many people dare to do something that other people are not doing. But then that's how history is made. Somebody always starts it. There's one person that starts it, and then the rest they start following.
I'm sure that, for instance, maybe Edison was just tired of not being able to work in the evening, or maybe there was the lights, or maybe it was danger, and then he's like, no, I want to change this.
Oh yeah, he got angry. I'm like, these freaking lights, man. These like because he probably had like candles. These candles are not good. I have to keep like buying new ones. And so that's interesting, like finding something that makes you angry. For me, oh wow, some political stuff makes me angry. And yeah, wow, that's interesting. What makes you angry? My political position is mostly on the right. And one time when I was in Israel, I went to a Holocaust museum, and it was very sad. But the thing that made me most upset that day was, mind you, this was January 2017 or something, just before Trump got into office. So he wasn't even in office. But this lady, she was looking at the scene of all the bombings that and all the people that died because of the Nazis and all that. And she looked at the scene and she was like, oh, this makes me so sad because it reminds me of Trump. And I just like, wow, that made me so upset for hours after that. The irrationality and the comparison between a innocent person and a person I would call still evil is incomprehensible. And obviously, as there was nothing like the Auschwitz, as I could have predicted. So anyway, but so do you think that's the only way though to find true anger? Because maybe that's a good indicator though.
It's not the only way. It's again actually about feeling the surge of energy inside. And that again comes down to being able to be with both discomfort and silence, and being able to observe what's happening inside. Another thing that is kind of like a comfortable and easy way is to, what do one likes to do that feels effortless, as in you can do it for hours without it being difficult.
Right. Yeah, that's more a classical term of what you love to do.
But the more interesting is the things that feel shameful and the things that feels anger, because that has a lot of energy in it. Because
shameful even, wow.
Yeah, because we feel our ego, our mind is terrified of being different, because the ego is terrified of being rejected.
Yes.
I started just hailing outside. I don't know if you can hear it.
That's great. I love hail.
So the ego is terrified of being different, because it then knows that it's a bigger risk of being rejected from the group. And the things that we are here to do, as in a soul work, is to create a difference, is to do something, to go, let me find the words. Our soul purpose is to come here and change a diseased pattern in society. And we will feel shame around that, because we know that when we start to voice or do something different, we are going to meet that resistance. And so our ego will try to have us hide that part. So it will activate shame.
Yeah. It's tough when you have let's say like now I'm in university in Scotland, and on political matters, I often my views are different than the younger students. Well, because a lot of my classmates are like 19, 20, and they have a particular view. It's very left. So sometimes I feel like embarrassed in a way, like to express my point of view, unless I really feel like I cannot contain, and just like, and feel, I often feel like sometimes that I have to express this, so because there's no other candidate for that point of view. So otherwise, if I'm not gonna be the candidate, there's no candidate at all. You know what I mean? So that kind of enrages me, and I've complained many times at the university of the biasness, but maybe that's why I'm in university, not for just for learning, but to fight for the balanced view, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, being a voice of change.
Yeah.
And my experience is that when we start to own that part inside, something starts to happen. Because, so for instance, if one still feels shame about being different, I'm going to take a personal example now.
Okay.
So I posted a sensual picture of myself. And as a response from that, there's always some kind of backlash from other women. That it triggers something. So I don't receive comments anymore, but I used to, but there will always be a larger amount of unfollowings by women.
Right.
And when that happened, I went inside of myself and I find that, there's an echo here. Something inside of me feels shame around posting a sensual picture. Something inside there is something for me to own inside. So what I did was to be with that, and I went further into that kind of sexual energy. And in my language, I call it dark feminine, which is the seductress. So I dressed in red lingerie and I did photo shoots of myself, and I was just expressing that energy.
Yeah.
So I was even more in that energy that was causing me to somehow feel shame, as in owning that part.
Yeah.
So for instance, then in a situation where one feels shame about, for instance, being maybe always the one who speaks the opposite,
Yeah.
is to, how can I own this even more?
That's interesting.
Because there's this parts of us, when we're feeling insecure, this will actually send signals out to others.
To attack us.
So they will pick up. So it's about, again, actually coming back to inner security, inner love, and inner acceptance. And then we get to own even more. And that's the difference between standing on firm, inside of ourselves and being able to express something, and not having the echo of shame be sent out.
I love that. You'd be even more bold in your uniqueness,
Yeah. How can I hold myself with gentleness that there's some kind of insecure part? Accepting it, because what we tend to do is to try to reject that part. And that is, again, actually like a hurt inner child that is wanting to, but this feels scary. And if we own that part is inside of us, something starts to transform.
So in your work, you do inner child work as well with clients, and you go there and you take them to significant events in their childhood.
Yeah, sometimes it's this life, sometimes it's past lives. It depends. So what happens in a session is that I sit down with someone and then their energy starts to speak to me. And sometimes I see colors, sometimes I see visions, sometimes I hear things. So it's this kind of, I have all the clears. So, and they speak to me in different ways. And they will speak to me in a way that makes sense for my client. So a lot of the time I have no idea what I'm saying or doing. It's like I will mentally not understand why the things are coming out. But the point is, it's not for me to understand, it's for that person. So it will always make sense for that person. So it's like, it unlocks shadows and darkness, which is wounds inside of that person. And then again, through being witnessed and being with the hurt that's inside, is like a huge burden that one is carrying around gets released and transmuted.
Yeah, so the hurt is so you okay, let's let's do a little bit now, but not, I don't want to go in the past. Can we go about I don't think we have time for that. It's too much stuff. Okay. If we go like, what if somebody comes to you and says, oh, you know, what do I have to do, or what do I have to focus on right now, kind of thing, or what's going on in my life that I'm not aware of?
So for instance, with you, I know you can edit this away, but it comes up of this image of you standing in an auditorium, and something that you felt was quite embarrassing happened. With some kind of situation that was very strong for you, and this somehow feels like it's keeping a little bit of lock. But before that, I feel like you were walking around trying to get your mother's attention, like from her skirts, and you were brushed off.
Yeah, I don't recall that.
I'm not in priestess mode now. So when I do a session, I will open up a space in a different way. So before you asked me when I started doing this work and why, and I've always been doing it. But the difference is that now I'm doing it in a conscious way. And now that I'm doing it in a conscious way, I do not usually pick up much about other people. Whereas before, I would constantly, subconsciously pick up emotions and feelings and memories and things from others. And I didn't know that I had psychic gifts. So I would sometimes say things and it would trigger the hell out of people.
Right. Yeah.
And the difference is now that I can control that gift. It's, you know, it's something I do in a session to release and help people. So I'm not suddenly just blurting out something in a private setting that is, you know how it is. We all have everything from different words or situations that are deeply, deeply traumatic for us that can trigger a huge response. And it could be 5 people in the room and 5 people will react differently.
Yes.
So maybe for 4 people, there is no reaction. And then from one person, it will be a lot of energy, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, some people, in a way, need more attention and coaching and stuff like that. I love this story. There's a famous example of there's a famous football coach, Jose Mourinho, and when he was in Italy in Inter coaching, there was this Italian player called Mario Balotelli, and Balotelli was out of control, kind of, especially at that age, early 20s. He had a yellow card in the first half, and the coach spent all of his time saying, Mario, please, if somebody touch you, no reaction. If the referee make a mistake, no reaction. If somebody says to you something bad, no reaction. Mario, please. Like he talked to them for 14 out of 15 minutes. And then they go to play, and about 10 minutes later, he gets a red card. he could not change Mario Balotelli. So it seems to me that some people in certain areas they need more attention because they're more, I don't know, there's more family stuff maybe that's brought up there, let's say.
Well, I believe we all come here with sacred wounds, as
Mm.
in there's certain situations that we're here to help transmute and change.
Mm.
And these situations we will keep experiencing until we're ready to embrace them. So I'm going to bring, for instance, again, the example of me keep having a lot of aggression towards me in my life because I was, without knowing, revealing people's wounds.
Yeah.
And it's when I started to be curious about this that it all changed. So, but before I was trying to hide, like I keep not understanding all this aggression towards me. So I would actually hide more and more until I actually looked at it. And that is then connected with me now, supporting other people, stepping into their gift. Through me learning in my life that when I'm trying to avoid situations that's causing a lot of energy, if you think of, for instance, anger.
Yeah.
When I own that this is my gift, when I own that my gift is to have this energy come out from people, I then get to rewrite it as in finding the light aspect instead of triggering the shadow aspect. But until I have owned that part of me, I will attract the shadow versions.
Right. Because that's what's attracting it, basically. That when we transmute that, we attract other sets of problems, I guess, from a different perspective, eh?
Yeah, but then again, if we then don't start to think of it as problems, is rather than why is this happening for me?
Yeah. I mean, there's like literature that says, oh, you should think of your problems as gifts and all that, But I think it's very hard for people when something comes up and they're like, oh shit, man, this is happening, and I have to figure this out.
The only reason why it's hard is because we have a society that is based around suppressing and taking medication or suppressing through watching endless TV or all these kinds of things people suppress with. So, and I believe that is beautiful change that is starting to happen in society, is of having a different way of interacting with children, for instance. So rather than having that society that was much more before, where children were supposed to be hushed and they're not supposed to look pretty and not be heard.
Yes.
And rather now, how we think about children in society is gradually changing more and more, but it needs to change even bigger. Through that is having a focus on children about emotional intelligence and also that acceptance, so that children can heal gradually as they are a child and not be walking around her children like really all of humanity is just basically wounded inner children that is walking around acting out from our wounds.
Right. That's a good way of putting it. You mentioned the sensual pictures, putting them on Facebook. I guess there's not many men that unfriend you from that, just women mostly.
Yeah, that's actually a wound I am now traveling with, is that I got like 700 or 800 Facebook friend requests and like 300 messages only yesterday.
Oh, are your posts public? like your posts so other people can see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's why.
Yeah. And then again, I'm at another wound, because for me, this is about, I believe that it's really important to embrace all parts of us. Our sensuality and our sexuality is a huge part of that. And I believe that most of society's capitalistic system is based on shame around sexuality in our body. There are very natural instincts and even very strong instincts. And so learning people then again to be with their sexual energy and be an owner of it and not just sending it out. So most people are again just projecting their sexual energy rather than harnessing and keeping it, because it's a huge power of energy and creation.
Are you talking about semen retention and not like dispersing your sexual energy everywhere, or like, I don't know, for women maybe it's a bit different?
Well, the thing is, again, is that learning that sexual energy isn't, first of all, shameful. And when we're not thinking of it as shameful, we've got to start to harness it to be inside of our bodies. So instead of it being something that we need to get rid of, we start to be able to hold more and more of that energy. And it will look different, yes, from a male and a female body, or depending on gender, because we also have other genders. So, but that's a very complex discussion. But the point is that being able to hold, for instance, feeling sexual arousal or sexual energy without needing to act and send it out.
Right.
To be able to feel it, enjoy it, and letting it be there.
Okay, so the purpose of that would be to not be at the effect of it, I guess.
Yeah, sexual energy is life force energy, and it's creative energy.
Okay. So in a way you can transmute sexual energy into creativity and writing or reading or okay, any kind of activity. Cool. So you do sessions on this as well, the
yeah.
Well, is it called it's not, sex coach sounds wrong. Well, what do you call it?
No, well, you can call it sex coach. I'm a certified sex coach.
Oh, is it okay? But does that mean that you help people with their performance or performance anxiety or everything before and after, or what is the I don't know how to wrap my head around this.
But for me, that also comes back to really self-love and self-acceptance.
Okay, so that's the main
when,
thing.
for instance, when one is able to hold oneself, like, oh, I'm experiencing, for instance, anxiety now. When one is then accepting, for instance, that within oneself, one start to be able to transmute it. Because what many will do is that if they feel anxiety, they will try to suppress that they feel it.
Yeah.
And that will drain a lot of energy. So the situations will look different. So I can support people in, for instance, learning a different way of touching their body. So for instance, for men, it can look like learning to be with yourself and not just going to a quick jerk off to porn, which basically will leave a very, very bad performance with a sexual partner. Because what we are doing when we are by ourselves is really practicing. It will be like how we behave with others. So it will be irrational to think that if one is doing a quick jerk off to porn.
Well, that's the two bads as well. Masturbation maybe not as bad as the pornography, because that's brings its own, I feel, very negative energy, because I've experienced it.
So orgasm is beautiful. It's one of the ways we can transmute blocks in our body. It's one of the ways we can build our life force energy. So masturbation is not bad at all. It's again learning how to, for instance, masturbate in a way that will give energy and will give self-love, and not be, because many masturbate in order to get rid of the energy.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
So if it then becomes being able to be with that energy and building up even more and more of that energy, that will lead to, for instance, how one is able to be as a lover. Because if you can hold more energy, you can hold more pleasure with yourself, of course, that would lead to being a better lover.
Yeah.
And the problem with porn is that porn is made to be addictive. It's usually one needs more and more violence or some kind of sexual roughness, because what it does, it directly goes more and activates the animal inside.
Yeah.
And there's nothing bad with animalistic sex. One of the most important aspects of everyone, but particularly for a male body, is to own the inner animal. And in a safe relationship, and by relationship, I do not mean a romantic relationship. A relationship can just be also for that evening. But
Right.
in a safe container, as in a relationship, you get to maybe explore that part. So, but first you need to own it, that is there.
Yeah.
But what happens with porn is that it's created to get dopamine hits, and it's also very visual. So you're in your head rather than being in the body. And all the pleasure is happening in the body. But the most important thing for me is to think of as there's a difference between erotica and porn. So erotica, as in consensual adults, that is having a true and real connection, versus porn, where it's actors.
Right. I've seen recently that there's people making attempts, not just making attempts, but posting more erotica porn, which I find, I don't know, some of it with storylines and some are with actual partners, like the posting stuff, and I don't know. I like, I just want to stay away from that altogether now.
Well, I think it's a very good idea to first start to master one's own energy.
Yeah.
And not necessarily needing a stimulus from someone else.
Sure.
Because if one always needs some kind of stimulus, then again, that affects how one lives one life. One is, everywhere where we need someone else to activate something within, we're giving away our power.
Yeah, so we have to, not we have to, but it would benefit us if we master ourselves in the emotional aspects, and then a lot of other areas of our life would be fixed, would be better, because we wouldn't be so much at the effect of the outer world.
Not being a victim of our emotions and our sexual drive, but being in control of it. And when I say control, I do not mean suppressing. I mean being able to hold it and feel it and act rather than react.
Right. So if people contact you, Marte, what is that, how I pronounce your name? Marte?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So if you want to contact you, it's for a self-love session, it's for sex coach, and it's for discovering your soul mission. Those three things?
Well, it's about inner exploration, really. So in that, I see people from all kinds of reasons, everything from anxiety to sexual trauma to wanting to have deeper orgasms to, it's the whole variety, really.
Awesome. So where can people contact you?
Well, Instagram is the best way, or to book directly through my website.
Okay, I'll put the links below on Facebook, on YouTube, or wherever you're watching or listening to this. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Do you have any last words before we part?
It's about getting curious about what's happening within. That is the key to having a life that is beautiful in every way.
Yeah. Okay, let's try the awkward pause once again, if you want.
Okay.
Maybe this one, I don't know how interesting this is for the audience, but maybe I'll try this. All right, I think we can go on for this for a while.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. Thank you, Mart, for being on the show, and I greatly enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching the podcast.